Εξοχότατε κύριε πρέσβη, αξιότιμες και αξιότιμοι κυρίες και κύριοι, φίλοι και συνάδελφοι. Είναι ιδιαίτερη χαρά να σας καλωσορίσω σε αυτό το ιστορικό κτίριο για να ακούσετε δύο διαλέξεις αφιερωμένες στο έργο της Βρετανικής Σχολής Αθηνών κατά το 2023. Πριν προηγήσω τις ομιλήτριες, θα ήθελα εκ μέρους της Βρετανικής Σχολής Αθηνών να εκφράσω τις θερμές ευχαριστίες μας στον αξιότιμο κύριο Βασίλειο Πετράκο, Γενικό Γραμματέα της Αρχαιολογικής Εταιρείας, και το προσωπικό της εταιρείας για τη φιλοξενία σε αυτό το, όπως είπαμε, ιστορικό κτίριο. Και προσωπικά πρέπει να σας πω, όπως μήπως ξέρετε, δεν είμαι αρχαιολόγος, ξεκίνησα φιλόλογος και ιδιαίτερα έτσι είναι συγκινητικό για μένα να βρεθώ τόσο κοντά στον Αλέξανδρο Ρίζο Ραγκαβή, ο οποίος υπήρξε όχι μόνο αρχαιολόγος, αλλά και ιστοριογράφος και ποιητής. Λοιπόν, I will now switch into English, since I understand this is an occasion in which the whole archaeological and scholarly community of Athens comes together in many languages. So the remainder of the evening's proceedings will be in English. So as you know from the program, we have two distinguished speakers this evening. I'll introduce the first of them, and then I'll come back and introduce the second. Rebecca Sweetman, as I'm sure everyone here knows, joined the British School at Athens as director in September 2022. She had previously been assistant director some 2 decades before that, from 2000 to 2003. And in between, she created a distinguished career for herself, which continues as Professor of Ancient History and Archaeology at the University of St. Andrews, where she also endured a stint as head of the School of Classics. Rebecca studied in Ireland, in her native Ireland, at University College Dublin, and did her PhD at Nottingham in the UK. Her research interests lie in Greek and Roman archaeology, in Roman and late antique Crete, the Peloponnese, especially Sparta, and her interest lies particularly in Roman and late antique mosaics and architecture. Among her many publications is her 2013 monograph, The Mosaics of Roman Crete, Art, Architecture and Social Change, published by CUP. She currently is seeing through press a collective volume jointly edited with Carlos Machado, entitled Late Antique Lived Spaces, published by Routledge, and her new monograph, The Roman and Late Antique Cyclades, Networks, Economy and Religion, is forthcoming from CUP. It's an undoubted fact that life changed at the BSA when Rebecca moved in with her family, and for those of you who know the classic works by the Durrell family, her family and other animals. Her two young teen sons, Connor and Aidan, have transformed the upper house once again into a family home. The dog Chewy, or Chewbacca, actually runs the place, and there's a more retiring cat, to say nothing of the long-term residents, the tortoises, who must have been there for centuries and will no doubt outlast us all. These are aspects of life at the BSA today that may or may not feature in the talk we're about to hear from Rebecca Sweetman on the work of the British School at Athens in 2013. Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Καλησπέρα σας. Εξοχότατε κύριε πρέσβη, αξιότιμοι συναδέλφοι και φίλοι, κυρίες και κύριοι. Είναι μεγάλη μου χαρά και τιμή να σας καλωρίζω απόψε στη αυτή τη μεγαλοπρέπη αίθουσα και να σας παρουσιάσω το έργο της Βρετανικής Σχολής Αθηνών του 2023. Καταρχήν, θα ήθελα να εκφράσω εκ μέρους της Βρετανικής Σχολής τις θερμές μας ευχαρίστες στον Γενικό Γραμματέα της Αρχαιολογικής Εταιρείας, κύριο Βασιλείο Πετράκου, και στον προσωπικό της εταιρείας για την φιλοξενία τους. Επίσης, ευχαριστώ θερμότητα το προσωπικό της Βρετανικής Σχολής εδώ στην Ελλάδα και στο Λονδίνο για την εξαιρετική συμβολή τους στο έργο της σχολής. Okay, I will continue. So this time last year, my phone went off, and it was indeed one of my children asking where the mayonnaise was. They may well ring again, but I've put it on silent. But also equally possible is they may turn up with Chewy and the cat in tow, so be warned. So it has been a jam-packed program for the BSA in 2023 with our fieldwork and research, academic events, outreach, knowledge exchange, and indeed collaboration. I started this work of the school with the announcement of the Fitch Laboratories year-long program of celebration for its 50th year anniversary. In many ways, the Fitch epitomizes the school's ethos and mission, supporting and undertaking research in Greece and Greek lands through an emphasis on people and community in the past and, of course, in the present. The Fitch has been critical in creating and sustaining many of our research relationships and networks across the world, from our collaborations with the American and Austrian schools in Athens and in Ismene to work on Tintagel with colleagues in Newcastle in the UK. The Fitch Laboratory is in many respects a beacon of our innovative approach in promoting STEM and women in STEM through mentoring and engagement. Together, the Fitch with the BSA are working at the intersection of arts and humanities and social sciences and indeed sciences in a way that not many institutions are able to do. So, as the Fitch turns 50, keep an eye out for its exciting research and knowledge exchange activities that it's planned. We've recently enjoyed getting to work with different communities this year. Our series of young archaeology workshops have given our colleagues opportunities to experiment in new ways of teaching. And in this case, actually, in the middle slide, you can see Carlotta, who has decided that cake is the best medium for teaching stratigraphy. And I can tell you the children, and indeed the staff, were quite happy to learn about stratigraphy through cake. We've also welcomed children from the Home Project. That is a group that looks after unaccompanied minors who are forced migrants. And these groups come to the BSA every other week to learn about archaeology. It's been wonderful working with the British Embassy so closely, and indeed the British Council. And we're particularly grateful for the support of Ambassador Matthew Lodge and his wife Alexia, and indeed Jamie Turner. Last spring, we co-organized a writing festival with the theme of the journey, drawing on work of ancient and contemporary writers. And we all gained new insights and approaches to the concept of the journey, and many of us in particular appreciated the fangirl moments with the very brilliant Victoria Hislop. In addition to their contributions to life at the BSA, including the Finlay Forum and Gin Nights, and of course there's no guessing, no work needed to realise that Gin Nights are the more popular, the work of the school students make invaluable contributions to its research agenda in its very broadest sense. We spoke about our school students, Flavia, Liz, and Rachel last year, and I'm delighted to say that Flavia is now working on a postdoc in Newcastle University, British Academy one, and Liz is currently teaching in Liverpool. Rachel has returned this year to be the Macmillan Rodewald student, working on her postdoc project on Bronze Age mortuary practices. Andriana Zanacki is one of our Carey students this year, and she is examining settlement patterns in the mountainous areas of Eastern Crete using statistical models and GIS approaches. And Matthew Evans is our Richard Bradford McConnell student. He's postdoctoral student working on Hellenistic and Roman gymnasia. Our community of BSA fellows have been working hard this year on their cool, as well as, of course, on the serious business of research. The Levendis Fellow in Hellenic Studies is Dr. Tulsi Parikh, and we're hugely grateful to the Levendis Foundation for their ongoing support of this fellowship. Tulsi is working on human experiences of sacred space through movement and sensory engagement. She also uses her work to explore inclusivity and accessibility within archaeology. She co-organized a conference with Alexia Petzalis Diomedes from St. Andrews on inclusivity in material culture, and she regularly organizes outreach activities with underrepresented communities in Athens. The 1821 fellow, Dr. Michalis Soteropoulos, has been focusing on the knowledge exchange element of the 1821 project, which is so generously funded by the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. The heart of the project are the George Finlay papers, and that also of Captain Frank Abney Hastings. Key contributors to the project include its mentor, Professor Roderick Beaton, of course, the school's chairman, Emilia Kakisis, the BSA archivist, Eleni Gavolou, our digital assets manager, and our IT past and present officers, Ioannis Delazios and Nathan Mayer. The three-day conference, Philhellenism and the Greek Revolution of 1821, Towards a Global History, was organized in the National Library of Greece with the generous support of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. And it was here that Digital Finlay was launched, the new electronic catalogue of Finlay papers and digitized items selected for this particular project, which are now freely available on the BSA's digital collections website. We will miss Michalis when he heads off to the Athens of the North to be the first lecturer in modern Greek studies in the University of Edinburgh. We reported last year on the work of our early career fellow and our visiting fellow, Dr. Lindsay Kuhn. And it's a great pleasure to say that Lindsay will actually be joining us again on council from spring. The School Teacher Fellowship was held by Sazi Ahmed from Kelmscott School, a multicultural state school in East London, and she spent a week in Athens in June. And then last year, the Arts Bursary Award holder was Joshua Whitaker, and he spent spring at the BSA looking at the Delphic Oracle and also at St. Paul's presence in Greece. I'm just showing you three of the BSA conferences that were held last year to give you an idea of the breadth of the material. So it included the GIS conference, the Byzantine conference run by Rosanna Valente, and then a workshop in honor of Roddy too on his retirement. We're really grateful to all those organizers. Recent BSA publications, of course, include the annual archaeological reports and the fantastic publication by the BSA archivist on Byzantium and British heritage. Our digital assets manager, Eleni Gavolou, is funded through the British Academy, and she's collaborating with all departments very closely to create and harmonize digital data in the development of, and she's also working in the development of the BSA digital humanities infrastructure. This will support information and knowledge sharing and wider public engagement. Nathan Mayer has been a huge help in this effort, and we're very grateful to him for his ongoing support. The work started last year on the Knossos spatial data, and it's in its final phase now. This data set includes excavation and survey sites, toponyms, and archaeological contexts in the Valley of Knossos. Many of those, of course, associated with the stratigraphical museum collections. It's being converted into a digital gazetteer of different levels of detail, as well as into spatial layers in a GIS prototype. This prototype will, in the future, integrate archival material, so for example, excavation diaries and plans, linked to the stratigraphical museum's objects. The BSA is also currently leading, thanks to our archivist Amelia and indeed Eleni, on the joint BIRI digitization project, which includes all 8 of the British International Research Institutes, and is coordinated by a new BSA colleague, Constantina Georgiadou. And we've been working towards standards and methodologies for developing a joint web portal to enable access to and facilitate querying and searching collectively in our resources. The BSA is leading the effort for adopting the digital storytelling approach as a method to illustrate links between collections and create engaging and interactive experiences for the research community and wider public. We were delighted to throw open the BSA's doors to undergraduate and postgraduate students once again for our taught courses, including the glass course that you see here. And we also ran the online teachers course, numismatic course, and Byzantine course too. And of course, the BSA summer school was held with the standard now run in the Olympic Stadium. Thanks to all of those who made such excellent contributions to the teaching, and in particular to organisers Yorgos Moratidis, the Assistant Director, Claire Rowan, and Rosanna Valente. The library has been its usual busy self and loves to welcome new readers, especially four-legged ones. Professor Ursula Pope delivered the Michael Freda Lecture, a Library University of Athens collaboration. We also had Kira Holborn as the library archive intern for 22-23, but sadly she had to leave early in 23 due to unexpected circumstances. We were very lucky in that Charlotte Townsend took up the position in May and stayed with us until the end of the year. We also benefited from the help of intern Georgia Kapopoulou from the University of Athens. Over 200 maps and 5 rare books were digitized and uploaded to the BSA digital platform. And brace yourselves, in more difficult news, it seems that Henry, the big fat cat over there, the ginger cat, who's named after King Henry VIII for very obvious reasons, has made himself king of the cats in the library, ousting Callie, the precious cat, who has instead had to make her presence felt at every single Upper House seminar, as we see here when she's hanging out with Natalie Haynes. Much of our archivist, Amelia Kakisi's time has been spent on the 1821 project and overseeing the BIRI Joint Digital Collection Coordination and Strategy Project. Amelia continues to accept, organise and catalogue donations and has undertaken a huge programme of training of interns and volunteers. We have here Rose Methol and Laura Kirkland, and later Sophie Stewart worked on the Nicholas Coldstream personal papers. Sam Newmarch worked on the Sylvia Benton personal papers, and he gave an excellent Finlay Forum on his work. And Eloise Maher, who undertook a wide variety of archive tasks, worked on the Hood Archive, and also she worked on one of our newer sets of material, the Lego material, and the oldest BSA photographic album too. Shanghu Lin worked on the inventory of the Sinclair Hood personal papers. We're also grateful to Melissa Rabnett, Alexander Simpson, and Emma Burton for their work on the archives too. Charlotte, who we mentioned earlier, assisted the archivist and digital assets manager with the BIRI digitization project and inventoried corporate records and completed the catalogue of the 1936 exhibition, which was also the subject of her Finlay Forum. The BSA is, as always, hugely grateful for the material that individuals and families donate to the archive. And this year, the Hood family sent more material for the Sinclair Hood Archive, including photographic material and works of art, including pieces by Pete de Jong, like you see here, and a John Craxton, which we've now donated to the Benaki Museum. The family of John Ellis Jones donated papers relating to his fieldwork in Greece, and we gratefully received some David French material from his daughter Anne. And Peter Bury donated a hugely gorgeous portrait of his great-grandfather, J.B. Bury. The Bader archive was delivered by the 1821 Fellow in Modern Greek Studies, Dr. Michalis Soteropoulos. Turning now to the Knossos Research Centre, summer 23 was extremely busy with research, outreach, and cultural exchange. There were two Knossos Research Centre summer lectures, one by Dr. Stella Mandalaki on dance rituals in Bronze Age Crete, and the other by Mrs. Evi Saliaki on board games of strategy and skill of the Venetian Guard of Spinalonga. The four-day cultural festival, Earth, Water, Fire, celebrating Cretan pottery from antiquity to present in Thrapsano, returned after the COVID hiatus. Events included lectures on Cretan pottery, with particular emphasis on the importance of the Thrapsano ceramic tradition as a living heritage, with workshops for adults and children and musical evenings with Cretan artists. The Villa Ariadne was a focus of a series of 4 lectures on its people, building, and gardens. And the BSA hosted the audio installation directed by Magda Corpi of Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. Those present were called upon to descend into the hinterland of Between, tracing the invisible world that lights the path for the experience of the visible. On the 29th of June, the BSA joined the embassy to host the King's Birthday Party 2023 at the Knossos Research Centre with the Ambassador Matthew Lodge, BSA colleagues and guests from across Crete. A large team of collaborators have sown flax in the Knossos Research Centre garden to produce handmade yarn, which will be woven using the traditional Cretan weaving techniques in an ongoing ethnographic project. The summer came to a close with an ethno-archaeological project at which potters from Thrapsano set up a pithos making workshop in the Knossos village square and introduced participants to the craft of making storage vessels. We're very grateful to the collaborators on all of these projects. A special mention should be made of the Knossos Legacy and Sustainability Project through its study of legacy material, focusing on the analysis of ceramic assemblages from different chronological periods, while also training the next generation of ceramicists. The Knossos curator, Kostis Christakis, is focused on the stratigraphical museum rebuilding project. In close collaboration with the Hellenic Ministry of Culture and Sports, the school will transform the Knossos Stratigraphical Museum and the Knossos Research Centre by providing world-class facilities for future generations of scholars, ensuring the best possible storage and conservation conditions for our collections and for attracting a new academic audience. As already mentioned, on the 29th of November, the Fitch laboratory will mark its 50th anniversary. As it was the first archaeological science laboratory in Greece, this also marks half a century of archaeological science in Greece. The Fitch team and volunteers, coordinated by Carlotta Gardner, the Fitch 2024 Outreach Officer, with the help of our archivist Amelia, are using the lead up to this to investigate and record the history and contribution of the laboratory to the wider field of archaeological science in Greece and beyond, which will be presented in a series of academic papers and public events. So keep an eye out, and Evangelia, of course, will be talking more about this in the next lecture. Over the past year, the Fitch Laboratory has opened its doors to a whole host of new audiences and even moved the laboratory to the Technopolis in Gazi, participating in Athens Science Festival last October. As an important aspect of the Fitch vision, it's growing its connections with contemporary potting communities with the aim of linking the two groups in that study and or make pottery. A range of ethno-archaeological and experimental work has already taken place in Greece and And in the UK, the Fitch is developing a collaboration with the Craft Potters Association through participation in their Spring Festival in London. Work on more than 30 projects has been undertaken in the last year, covering all periods from the Neolithic to medieval periods and expanding well beyond its Aegean focus. This research has been undertaken by Fitch staff, associate or visiting researchers, and international collaborators. Only 2 of the projects will be highlighted tonight, starting with the main project of the current Williams Fellow in Ceramic Analysis, Sergios Menelaou. Sergios his research focuses on the early Bronze Age Northeast Aegean, covering an interface zone between the Aegean and Anatolia, an area that's of crucial importance for understanding developments during the early Bronze Age, which is, of course, a period of intense mobility and technological transfer, but with also evidence for cultural and social complexity and regional differentiation. This study, implementing a methodology that combines macroscopic morphostylistic examination of pottery with thin section petrography and elemental analysis through WDXRF of both pottery and geological samples, is the first to undertake a comprehensive analytical look at the prehistoric ceramic industry of key sites for this period, such as Polyokmi on Limnos, Thermi on Lesvos, and Emburio on Chios. Preliminary results indicate overall technological continuity with period-specific change. Significant amounts of imports at each site, particularly during the mid-3rd millennium BC, signifies the intensification of connectivity of Lemnos, Lesvos, Chios, and Samos with several Cycladic islands, as well as with sites in the Western Anatolian littoral and other Eastern Aegean islands like Imbros. Early indications are that these island communities were significantly more complex and interconnected than once envisaged, and comprise active social and economic hubs in different networks of mobility. Edita Marzek's research is on classical and the Hellenistic Cyclades as part of a project called INSIDE. Beyond the study and analysis of pottery from Delos, Edita has also recently undertaken integrated macroscopic and laboratory analysis of ceramic material from Tinos. Along with the analysis of raw materials from the island, this work has resulted in the identification and characterization of local pottery production in the classical and Hellenistic periods. Tenian workshops made a range of ceramic materials, including transport amphora, cooking and tablewares, weaving tools, lamps, and building materials, some of which were occasionally stamped with the symbol of the trident or the inscription Tenion. Combined with the ceramic analysis from the French work at Delos, this study is showing that the Tenians were once one of the major suppliers of Delos, especially in cooking lamps and building materials. And this helps to balance the focus thus far on products from long distance trade with Delos during the late Hellenistic period. Finally, the Fitch hosted 3 training courses for 16 PhD students from a range of European universities as part of its participation in place. That aims to train the next generation of archaeological scientists in interdisciplinary study of pre-modern plasters and ceramics from the Eastern Mediterranean. Thanks to all the contributors from colleagues at the Wiener and UCL as well. So let's turn now to the BSA fieldwork projects. And the BSA once again expresses its gratitude to colleagues in the Ministry of Culture and Sport for their support and collaboration. Mr. Yorgos Didaskolou, Secretary General of the Ministry of Culture and Sports, Dr. Polixeni Adam Valeni, Director General of Antiquities, and Dr. Elena Kunduri, Director of Prehistorical and Classical Antiquities, as well as numerous others in the ministry who make our archaeological work possible, and those in charge of the efforts of antiquities in which fieldwork and study took place. We, of course, at the BSA could never have done this work without the ever-positive and talented Tanya Yarusi, and this year we were joined by Nikki Papakonstantinou, who has seamlessly taken up the role of permit assistant as if she was always meant to be with us. The second excavation season of the Tumba Seron project took place at this Neolithic village on the eastern side of the Stromian Valley of northern Greece. Colleagues at Tumba Seron were part of a pilot program for tetrarchs, which is funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. And it aims to revolutionize how archaeological data is collected and utilized, emphasizing its reusability for storytelling that engages diverse audiences. As well as supporting the development of the project's digital infrastructure and workflow, Tetrarchs is also working with the project's ethnographer, Ioana Antoniadou, to conduct a project stakeholder evaluation that will seek to explore the user needs of various groups with an interest in the project, including local communities, educators, and municipalities. The geophysical survey was completed in November 22, which allowed the summer field season to start with a complete set of geophysical data. The aims of this season were to characterize extents and preservation of the deposits on the site and refine the dating of the site. They aim to uncover a complete representative late Neolithic structure and to expose and examine the morphology of the large linear feature that appears, indeed from the geophysical survey, to form the outer boundary of the site. Specifically, the team was interested in establishing whether this was a wall or a ditch and bank structure. 3 trenches were opened this season to address these questions. And excavations in Area 4 were revealed structures dating to late Neolithic 1, and they were dated by ceramic finds, in addition to a stratigraphically higher structure, which was badly damaged due to its location close to the plough zone. The associated pottery suggests that the building belongs to late Neolithic 1, but actually with 2 occupation phases in this period. Work in Area 5 helped to characterize the boundary of the site, which was made of coarse mud brick and possibly also had a stone face. A possible external ditch was partially investigated to reveal 2 quite tightly flexed burials. And it's potentially an unprecedented find because there haven't been any late Neolithic 1 burials found in at least this part of the Stromian Valley. Work in Area 5, also helped characterize the boundary of the site, which was made of courses of mud brick. I've just said that, haven't I? Work at Tumba Seron has confirmed the presence of structures linked to 2 phases of late Neolithic activity on the site. While surface finds and background material continue to indicate the presence of late Neolithic 2 activity, no structural evidence has been found in situ for this period. It therefore suggests that this activity, late Neolithic 2 activity, might either be quite localized or it's been affected by being so close to modern agricultural practices. So exploration of this area and closer dating of the burials will be undertaken to establish whether there is a pattern of extramural burial and cemetery activity here, and this will form part of the research agenda for the 24th season. Turning now to the Embryo Hinterland project, it is a collaboration between the Everett of Antiquities of Chios and the British School of Athens to conduct an intensive survey of 10 square kilometers, that kind of portion of the site of southwestern Chios around the well-known archaeological site of Embryo. The project, led by Andrew Bevan, reports that their priority in 23 was to achieve as wide coverage as possible of the study area via pedestrian survey and complementary topographic and architectural mapping. They walked 65,000 individual 10-meter survey units over an area of 6.6 square kilometers. Combined with the survey in 21, about 75% of the mandated survey area has now been covered, and most of the area of intense human activity. Surveyors recorded counts of 50,000 sherds of pottery and 10,000 tile fragments on the landscape floor surface, and they also made collection of 5,000 diagnostic potsherds. Preliminary results indicate a range of new sites of prehistoric, archaic, classical, Hellenistic, Roman, late Roman, and medieval date, while some other site locations from previous studies were re-identified and revisited this year and better defined. Only a small amount of prehistoric evidence appears across the whole survey area, and at present, only a small number of prehistoric scatters and isolated finds beyond the excavated prehistoric levels at Emboreo have been identified, and also there's material at the rescue excavations of the small site of Fokine. A very limited amount of prehistoric knapp stone was found, including obsidian, and only one small scatter of the stone was found near the Emboreo harbour. It produced a couple of fragments like the data that you see here. And then the best comparanda for this is probably from the later Neolithic levels at Emboreo itself. This corroborates the pattern seen at Emboreo excavations, where later Neolithic and Bronze Age assemblages, particularly lithic assemblages, was not particularly impressive. And it's a further indication that we shouldn't let the high profile nature of Emboreo as publication mislead us about this relatively modest size and resource of this Emboreo site, as well as the seemingly low density of other Neolithic Bronze Age activity nearby. This is particularly true if we contrast it with the contemporary sites on the opposite Turkish coast, such as Limana Tepe. A further dearth worth highlighting is the very limited surface evidence from the 7th century BCE town and its environs on the hill of Prophetess Elias. In the 1950s, the excavators had already noted how eroded the deposits were, explained either as limited pottery deposition during the town's brief around 100-year history or life, or that much of the possible evidence had been eroded down slope. The recording of a standing soil section below Prophetess Elias on the northern edge of the modern village of Emboreo suggests the same thing, with evidence of stratified material such as pit and walling visible at some depth below hill-wash deposits. This pattern is seen elsewhere, such as in the Komi Valley to the northeast, where the same problem exists but is actually bigger here. Recent rescue excavations by the Greek Archaeological Service found evidence for a late Roman building a couple of meters down from the modern land surface. Our survey corroborates this pattern with amphora fragments found in a section at depth below the modern riverbed, and a series of dense pottery scatters on the eastern side of the valley, giving way to a blank area. We hope to unpick these patterns of archaeological dearth, loss, and/or concealment via further study. More straightforward, however, is the very considerable amount of evidence from periods from about 650 BCE onwards, beginning in the Archaic and through Classical Hellenistic, Roman, late Roman, and medieval and Ottoman. The Archaic period is, as we would expect from the rich evidence elsewhere on Chios, a peak period, with a lot of coarse and fine decorated ceramics, tile, and surviving wall foundations at several sites. As we can see here, there are two examples of some of the more impressive archaic surface material, and the terracotta figurine head is one of several pieces of evidence suggesting a small special site astride the modern road out of Emboreo and up towards the modern Mastic Museum. This roadway was clearly a key artery in the past, with with sites of many periods found alongside it, and a long line of heavy-set walling too. We also conducted a drone-based survey of major sites in 23, which included a new rock art site on the northern slopes of Prophetess Elias, in which the underside of a small rock shelter had been painted in red pigment with the design of multiple circles with stems and bordered by parallel lines. Now we turn to Samos, where work this year focused on intensively exploring the Kalovrasi Basin in the northwest of Samos Island. 5 weeks were devoted to field walking, with 2 weeks of ceramic study and ethnographic work having already taken place earlier in the year. Two field walking strategies were employed throughout the season. First, long transects were walked in the area bound by the village of Hadrusa and by the river Panepistimiou, with more intensive walking conducted at those points on the transects indicative of hotspots. Second, areas were walked with complete coverage that had been suggested as possible points of interest through the ethnographic survey that they'd already undertaken in the regions of Xerokambos, Nikolaos, Vresis, and Hadrusa. The density of pottery scatters were used to identify up to 18 areas of interest, and many of these areas actually yielded predominantly early Byzantine pottery, notably with fewer transport amphora and more fine wares than which was the opposite the year before. Worked ashlar blocks, possibly ancient, were located in various places that are indicated here, and a few pieces of archaic and classical pottery were found this year. Preliminary work suggests that the majority of first millennium sherds were tablewares with late Roman and Byzantine Xerokambos and Hellenistic and Roman at Hadrusa. The southwest region close to the river also yielded material of archaic date. Most appear to have been locally made in southern Ionia. Most of the 108 points of interest were registered to be either clusters of ceramic or rock, or built structures or reused material like we see here. Connectivity between the north and south basins was examined with a view to understanding the navigability of specific routes or pathways between the areas. And then systematic drone data was most complete for this area, and the presence of private property and or military installations impacted on other transects, so they weren't able to scan a complete mosaic, but 30 flights were undertaken to complete what they've got here. So the final site we'll talk about today is Palekastro on Crete. It saw in 2023, they undertook a third campaign of underwater exploration with additional work on two submerged Minoan buildings, one of which, the regular structure in the middle of Kouroumanos Bay, is shown here. The Roman shipwreck from 2021 has now been photographed with illumination, allowing a better 3D model. A second Roman shipwreck was found also in the Cavo Placo area. There are fewer amphora visible, possibly because of the shallower depths between 6 and 12 meters. The types of amphora are pseudo-Coan, indicating a date in about the 1st or 2nd century CE. So similar to Wreck 1. Remains of a modern wreck have also been located close to the Grandes Islands, and there are traces of a wooden hull with bronze nails still visible as well, and it probably dates to the 19th century, if not earlier. Geophysical survey was also conducted in 23 with both ground penetrating radar and resistivity. Areas of both Kouroumanos and Fiona Bays were covered with the aim of revealing indications of buried structures adjacent to the submerged and excavated structures identified in the project to date. Results from the East Beach at Fiona were particularly encouraging. Here we see the ground penetrating radar indicating more walls adjacent to the remains excavated in 22. Moreover, the underwater resistivity points to a possible structure in the sand in the shallows. During their study season in July and August, the team was faced with the daunting task of sorting and joining a particularly large pottery deposit excavated on the Fiona promontory last year. The deposit consisted of 12 jars, some of which were found intact on the floor, while others had fallen from upper levels and therefore broken into many pieces. The range of shapes and decorations is fascinating, and when the study is complete in 24, it'll give us a remarkable insight into storage practices in the late Minoan 3A period, particularly in this urban neighbourhood about which we previously knew very little. We were also able to strew and catalogue pottery from Trench 2 and Trench 4, which are from the Fiona promontory and East Beach respectively. The latter study confirming the occupation of this zone from the early Pertipalatial period, and this is contemporary with the adjacent burial ridge. That concludes our research and outreach. But before I give the floor to Evangelia, I'd like to remember a few of the BSA greats who have died this year. Jonathan Musgrave worked on the human skeletal remains from numerous BSA projects, from Myrtos Pyrgos in Crete to Koukos in Chalkidiki. His work on the occupants of the Vergina tombs with John Prague is still of fundamental importance. Diana Wardle was a BSA student from 1970 onwards, and she had a long and deep association with BSA and its excavations. As an excellent draftswoman with an immense knowledge of Greek costume, she always had a warm welcome for everyone, be it on site or in her kitchen. So in terms of staffing, we said farewell to Kate Smith, our London administrator and development officer, who's gone on to do great things in Bristol. And we welcomed Flora Michalaki to take up the position in London, Katrina Gallagher to the role of public engagement and development officer here in Athens. And just recently, we said farewell to Miles Stevenson, our development executive. And we promised horses. And finally, while this job sometimes feels a bit like herding horses, I would like to say a huge thanks to all the staff at the BSA in Athens, London, and Knossos. And a particularly big thanks to our Deputy Honorary Treasurer, Hugh Smith, and our Chairman, Roderick Beaton, who give their time and energy so cheerfully to the BSA. I'd also like to say thank you to all the subcommittees and colleagues that work with us at BSA Council, BSA Friends, here in Athens and in London, and their committees, publication teams, supporters, and everyone who works behind the scenes in supporting the work of the school, and to all of you here. Thank you very much.
Well, on behalf of us all, I'd like to thank Rebecca most warmly for that wonderful presentation of the sheer richness and variety of the activities of the British School at Athens, yet again in the year 2023. And as you saw from those slides and from the account, there are, although we are a small institution in that little oasis we're fortunate enough to occupy in the center of Athens in Kolonaki, lots and lots of people of different ages and backgrounds and interests pass through our doors or through that garden, either in Athens or in our parallel research center in Knossos in Crete. I never cease to marvel at how Rebecca and her staff manage to get so much done in 12 months. So many congratulations on behalf of the Council of the BSA and of all of us. There's just, I mean, I would like in particular, I think perhaps while I have the floor, just to emphasize perhaps three things about the account we've just heard. The first is the enormous chronological range that is covered by the British School at Athens. We heard about Neolithic archaeology, Roman shipwrecks, classical sites, the Ottoman period, the period of the Greek Revolution of the 1820s, and the work of the school comes right up to date with Greece in the contemporary world. I think it's very important that we are one of few institutions. Certainly, it's hard to find one in the UK that could match the British School in this respect, in gathering together so much expertise on so many different aspects of Hellenic studies and the Hellenic world. The second thing I'd like to draw attention to, came out loud and clear from really everything that Rebecca said and from the many names that you saw on the screen. The British School is all about collaboration, it's about cooperation, it's about working with institutions and organizations, both here in Greece, in the UK, and also in many other places in the world. And that's particularly important here where we're hosted by the Archaeological Society. all of the archaeological work that you heard depends on very close collaboration with and support from the Archaeological Service, the Ministry of Culture, and the various professional people who guard those, who manage those treasures of this country. And the other that I was particularly struck, I was particularly pleased that the British School at Athens is one of, forgive me, I'm not even sure I've counted them, but a dazzling array of what we call loosely the foreign schools here in Athens. And that's a form of international collaboration that really could only work here in Greece. And by all accounts, it does work extremely well. And I'm very pleased to see you, to welcome so many members of the other foreign schools here this evening. We really appreciate your support and collaboration. And the third, just very briefly, an awful lot of this is about passing on the torch to future generations. We're talking about research, we're talking about sometimes really quite highly technical aspects of the cutting edge of various technologies, and more about those later, but also several different academic disciplines. But this is not ever done in a vacuum. Everything that the British School does, it seems to me, is also based around teaching, mentoring, bringing on, encouraging future generations. So I think what we're hearing in the work of the school in 1 year, 2023, an awful lot of that is about the mentoring and the kind of hatching out, if you like, of passing on the torch to future generations of archaeologists and scholars in all aspects of Hellenic studies. So, Rebecca, thank you, and thank your colleagues most warmly for all that fantastic work and the presentation of it. And now we pass seamlessly to the second presentation of the evening. Evangelia Kiriatzi, known widely to her friends and colleagues as Evangelia, comes from Drama. She studied at her studies were at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, where we were just 2 days ago, giving a similar presentation. Though there Evangelia spoke in Greek. Here, I understand she's going to speak in English. And it's at the Aristoteliou that she did she finished her PhD on ceramic production from the Tumba of Thessaloniki. She began her career working with the 16th effort of antiquities, for prehistoric and classical antiquities, in collaboration with the Aristoteliou. And she worked on several research programs there. She also spent some time in the UK, working for 4 years with the universities of Sheffield, Cambridge, and University College London. She came back to Greece at the beginning, I suppose it must have been, of the new millennium, and I was actually quite startled to realize quite recently that it was in 2001, more than 20 years ago, that Evangelia took up her duties as director of the Fitch laboratory at the British School at Athens, which of course will be the subject of tonight's talk. Her research interests are concentrated around the study of technology as a social phenomenon, seen through the prism of interdisciplinary studies, particularly of ceramics, with a particular focus on prehistoric period, but also diachronically, principally on the Aegean area, but also, as you'll hear, you heard already from the previous talk, and you will see loud and clear from the next one, far beyond the land of Greece or the Aegean region, reaching as far as Tintagel in southwest England. She organizes, she manages a significant team. You saw the photographs in the previous presentation. She's been running the Fitch laboratory and producing results that we'll hear more about. And somehow, in the course of all this, she manages to produce more than 100 academic publications over the last few years. So congratulations on that too, Evangelia. Quite enough. That's quite enough from me. I hand over now to Evangelia Kiriatzi, who's going to talk to us on the Marc and Ismene Fitch Laboratory for Archaeological Science, the progress, I have the title in Greek, I'm sorry, the progress of the last 50 years. Evangelia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Roderick, very much for the nice introduction. Καλησπέρα σε όλους και από μένα. Αγαπημένοι φίλοι, συνάδελφοι και συνεργάτες, θα ήθελα και εγώ να σας ευχαριστήσω εκ μέρους της Βρετανικής Σχολής, αλλά πιο πολύ εκ μέρους της ομάδας του Fitch, που είναι όλοι τους εδώ, εκεί πίσω, για την τιμή που μας κάνατε απόψε, να είστε μαζί μας σε αυτή την ομιλία που ουσιαστικά είναι η αρχή μιας σειράς εκδηλώσεων που προγραμματίζουμε στην Αθήνα, αλλά και στη Βρετανία, για να γιορτάσουμε τα 50 χρόνια του εργαστηρίου μας. Dear colleagues, friends and collaborators, I would like to thank you all being with us tonight on behalf of the BSA, but particularly on behalf of the Fitch team, and they are all here tonight, for being with us to start celebrating the 50 years of the Fitch throughout this year, through a series of events this year. Now, before I start, I would like to say that it's, of course, a great honor for me to give this lecture for the 50 years of an institution like the Fitch Laboratory, but also it's a great responsibility to talk about the history of the Fitch, of course, on behalf of a long series of people that have worked at the lab, collaborated with the Fitch, got trained there, or supported the Fitch in many different ways. So I'll try to do my best for them. As you would expect, there is going to be a lot of going back in time tonight. And I will start with a travel through a time machine back to year 1974. No? No, okay. So year 1974 is certainly a milestone in the history of modern Greece, but also an important year in the political and socio-economic history of the United Kingdom, the two countries whose role has been interwoven in the history of the British school at Athens. In Greece, the collapse of Junta brings the country back to democracy, but the new positive era and the start of the country's economic development is dramatically marked by the Turkish invasion to Cyprus and the war with Turkey. Greece is entering a new phase in its international affairs with growing emphasis on its relation with Europe, but it will take a few more years to join the European Union. On the other hand, the UK, having just joined the EU in 1973, these were different times, goes through a year of political and economic unrest with two general elections, strikes, an economic crisis, and also an emergency situation in Northern Ireland. It is within this era of economic and political unrest in both countries that the British School at Athens, following, or more correctly contributing, to current developments in the field of archaeology, establishes the Fitch laboratory. This not only marked a new phase in the history of the institution, but it also coincided with the beginning of a new phase in the history of archaeology worldwide. Definitely a new phase in the history of Greek archaeology is about to start. The official opening of the new laboratory took place on Friday, 29 November 1974, at the end of this dramatic year for Greece, and on a day of total lunar eclipse. The gods did not seem to be very happy, but Hector Catlin and the BSA were very determined to proceed, quite rightly, as history proved, celebrating the successful implementation of an idea that was born a few years ago, and it took a lot of effort and agony to realize. In the first years, the Fitch was almost a one-man show. Previously used the storage area of excavation equipment, the so-called West Wall Apotheke. Richard Jones, its first research officer, and then director, seen here at the bottom right, arrived in Athens in May 1974. He set up the mostly second-hand equipment donated by the University of Oxford and went straight into the analysis of archaeological materials from BSA projects. Being a member of a humanities institution for the first time in his life, he invested a lot in familiarizing himself with local archaeology. But he also invested in setting up collaborations with the local community of archaeologists, putting a lot of emphasis on familiarizing them with the potential, the actual practice of the new scientific applications, but also their limitations. At the same time, more or less, a small group of scientists with Grimanis, Philippakis, and later Yannis Maniatis, and their collaborators in the country's National Center for Scientific Research, Demokritos, launched a similar effort. These were really the pioneers in archaeological science in Greece, and they often joined forces to experiment with new applications in a number of projects, but also invest in building bridges between archaeology and science. That was the laboratory's reality in the early years. Today, 50 years later, the Fitch laboratory is hosted in a two-story building with specialized equipment and facilities to support research in various fields of archaeological science, such as human osteology, zooarchaeology, archaeobotany, soil micromorphology, pigment analysis, archaeometallurgy, and geophysical prospection, but it has been mainly developed into a center for ceramic studies. It is one of almost a dozen laboratories active in any of the fields of archaeological science in Greece, and one of the main centers globally for ceramic analysis. It hosts around 20 to 30 scholars annually, collaborates in about 30 to 40 projects every year, having established an extensive global network of collaborations, and through securing large-scale funding from national and international funding bodies. But it also runs an ambitious training program, both through taught courses and practice. The focus of its research remains on Greece and the Aegean, but its wider area of study has expanded across the Mediterranean and occasionally even beyond it. This development, of course, was not sudden. It took many years, actually half a century, and it was not linear either. One can see some milestones in the life of the laboratory that comprise the main launching points for further development. Tonight, I would like to refer to three of them that I consider most crucial for the lab's history. The first is, of course, its genesis, and it goes far beyond the 29th of November, 1974, when the official opening of the laboratory took place, The idea of a laboratory at the BSA was gradually conceived over a period of some years, mainly in the colleges and laboratories of the University of Oxford back in the UK. Although since the early years of archaeology, even before the 20th century, one can occasionally see applications of scientific techniques in archaeological research, it is during the 1960s and 1970s, in the context of new archaeology, mainly in the US and Britain, that new theoretical and methodological approaches develop in the field of archaeology, in the framework of the so-called processual archaeology, encouraging a growing collaboration with science and eventually interdisciplinarity. Under the impact of these developments, a number of pioneering projects took place in Greece, mainly in the 1960s and 1970s. Most of them related with the British School at Athens and British institutions and run by teams of archaeologists and experts from other scientific fields. These include the survey and a number of excavations by Eric Higgs of the University of Cambridge in research of the Paleolithic across Thrace, Macedonia, and eventually Epirus, and the excavations of the Neolithic sites of Sitagri by Revthriou and Kiboutas, Nea Nicomedia by Roderick, and Knossos by John Evans. These projects set the foundations for the systematic research of the early prehistory of Greece since the Paleolithic, often providing revolutionary new data and introducing new practices, but most importantly, opening the way for the advent of interdisciplinarity in Greek archaeology and beyond. Within this era, already in 1955, the Oxford Research Laboratory for Archaeology and the History of Art was established by the University of Oxford. It was one of the first, if not the first, such laboratory in the world. Its first director, Edward Hall, as well as its assistant director, Martin Aitken, will eventually play a key role in the genesis of the Fitch laboratory. Since 1958, the Oxford Laboratory's research was presented annually in a newsletter called Archaeometry. Today, this is one of the leading peer-reviewed journals in the field of archaeological science. The fourth issue of Archaeometry in 1961 includes a paper by Hector Catlin, Eva Richards, and Blindstoyle entitled Spectrographic Analysis of Mycenaean and Minoan Pottery. This paper was a precursor of a series of developments that lead to the establishment of the Fitch Laboratory in Athens more than a decade later. The related study for this paper was based on Sinclair Hood's, then BSA Director, initiative to approach the then recently established Oxford Laboratory in order to explore the potential of provenance analysis of Mycenaean and Minoan pottery from a number of archaeological sites across Southern Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. The result collaboration brought closer together the then curator of the Ismene Museum, Hector Catlin, with Edward Hall and Martin Aitken, and those three with the British School at Athens. Collaboration and discussions between those key actors continued in Oxford, both in the laboratory but also at college dinners. And when in 1971 Hector Catlin was appointed BSA Director, this interaction provided the fertile ground for the cultivation of a seed idea by Martin Aitken for a small laboratory in Athens, to continue the work already undertaken in Oxford on ceramics. The new BSA Director, Hector Catlin, endorsed very enthusiastically this idea with the support of the BSA Council Chair, Vincent Desborough, and this became one of his main objectives when he arrived in Athens to take up his duties. The proposal for a mini-lab, as it was originally called, was positively discussed by the BSA Council and approved despite some concerns about the sustainability of the plan, naturally, of course. Subsequently, an application was submitted to the Greek Ministry of Culture at the end of 1971, which was considered very positively and rather quickly approved. The next target towards the establishment of the laboratory was securing the necessary funding, and that proved to be the most difficult target to accomplish. The total cost was estimated at £18,400. The British Academy reacted positively, but emphasizing that they were only to support humanities research, undertook the responsibility to cover the annual running expenses, but once the lab would have been established. Edward Hall and Martin Aitken of the Oxford Laboratory promised enthusiastically to provide analytical equipment, but also continuous support in training and supervising. Under these circumstances, in 1972, the BSA eventually launched a fundraising campaign to cover the actual cost for the establishment of the laboratory. Only a few small donations came from the Goldsmiths Company of the City of London and the Ernest Cook Trust, covering a couple of £100. It was definitely not the best time for such an appeal in the UK due to the non-advantageous economic conditions marked by constantly high inflation rates. Efforts continued for almost a year, and in summer 1973, it seemed that the whole plan was ready to be abandoned. It was then that Marc Fitch appeared as Deus ex machina, απομηχανής Θεός, and provided all the necessary funding for the laboratory that eventually was named after him and his Greek wife, Ismene. The Marc and Ismene Fitch Research Laboratory was officially opened in November 1974 by Sir Brooke Richards, British Ambassador to Greece, in the presence of the Secretary of the British Academy and a number of Greek archaeologists, but also many members of foreign schools in Athens, a bit like today, in a ceremony followed by a reception hosted by Hector and Elizabeth Catley. These are some of the photos we have from the official opening of the Fitch. We don't have many, and these are surely very different times in terms of event documentation and promotion. During the first 13 years of full function of the Fitch Laboratory, a long list of projects was undertaken, producing a number of publications, culminating in the emblematic volume by Richard Jones in 1986, Greek and Cypriot Pottery, a review of scientific studies. During the same year, the BSA celebrated its centenary, and the decision was made for a laboratory extension to be built. That is the second milestone in the laboratory's history. It was actually the construction of a purpose-designed laboratory building by the architect Nikos Arganis, who is with us tonight. The construction of the new Fitch was made possible again mainly due to the general support of Marc and Ismene Fitch. The promising achievements of the Fitch Laboratory, however, persuaded more to join the vision of the BSA, and the list of supporters grew longer. More importantly, donations by Charles Williams II, the then newly established Instap of Malcolm Winner, and the Greenlands Bank covered the needs for new equipment, while a donation by the Konstantinidis family a couple of years later, on the occasion of Hector Catlin's retirement, supported crucially the establishment of an environmental unit. The new Fitch building was officially opened on 14 April 1988, with a much better documented event this time and wide coverage by Greek newspapers. The new premises have boosted really the activities of the laboratory. Its wider role is reflected in the development into a center for ceramic analysis with newly introduced approaches such as ceramic petrology, but also in the wider application of geophysical prospection in Greek excavations, and of course in the introduction and support of zooarchaeology, and archaeobotany in Greek archaeology. The third milestone in the laboratory's history dates about 2 decades later in 2009 to 2010, when a refurbishment program was undertaken, combined with the establishment of a new analytical chemistry unit at the Fitch, employing a different technique, WDXRF spectroscopy, that seemed to match better the needs of the lab, but also of the wider field of Mediterranean ceramics. This transformation of the Fitch, combined with a newly established position, that of the lab's scientific research officer, was generously supported by Mr. Charles Williams. That was the second long-term research post at the Fitch, beyond that of the lab director, that really boosted its research capacity. A post originally held by Mirto Georgakopoulou and currently by Noemi Muller. This new addition, together with a new in-house facility for chemical analysis, combined the existing equipment for petrographic analysis, as well as the previously funded Williams postdoctoral fellowship in ceramic petrology, and a rapidly growing reference collection for such research, with admirable admin and technical support by Zois Gouleta and Michalis Akalis, have established the Fitch as a unique facility for ceramic studies worldwide, with great potential for further development. At the same time, a grant by the Bradford McConnell Trust, another long-lasting supporter of the BSA, covered the essential requirements for the launching of a training course in ceramic petrology. Both these developments in 2010 marked the beginning of a new phase in the laboratory's history. Since then, the Fitch has developed an ambitious program of research and training through a rapidly growing network of international collaborations. I would like now to take you briefly through some of the aspects of the laboratory's history, starting with its research. During the 50 years of the Fitch laboratory, more than 200 projects have been undertaken by its staff across Greece and beyond. On this map, you can see the geographical distribution of the sites related to these projects, while a similar number of projects, admittedly with much wider distribution, have been carried out by visiting researchers and bursary holders. All these have produced, of course, numerous publications, promoting significantly our knowledge of the past in the Aegean and wider Mediterranean, but also contributing to methodological developments in various fields of archaeological science. The original mini-lab of the BSA, with its second-hand equipment, proved to be a very successful experiment that led the way for others to follow. And the loneliness of Richard Jones and the first pioneers in the early years is now replaced by the potential to routinely interact, consult, and collaborate with numerous experts and specialized labs in Greece, like with our neighbors at the Winner Lab, our colleagues at Demokritos, or at the relevant departments of the Ministry of Culture. As an archaeological science laboratory within a humanities institution, the main characteristic of the Fitch has always been its strong link with archaeology. The emphasis has been, from the beginning, on the use of scientific techniques to address specific questions in the context of specific research projects, rather than experimenting with materials and techniques. As it has always followed broader developments in the field of archaeology, it has had a crucial contribution in building bridges between archaeology and science, but also familiarizing archaeologists, both Greek and foreign, working in Greece, with the potential and the limitations of the scientific applications. Transforming the practice of archaeology in this country, for example, ceramic analysis and mainly ceramic petrology, have almost become a routine in pottery studies these days. So its contribution relates to the adoption of new research practices in Greek archaeology, but also the establishment of a new generation of archaeological scientists in Greece that have an active role in broader global developments. I would like to refer very briefly to a couple of more specific contributions that the Fitch Lab has achieved during these 50 years. I will start with geophysical prospection, a less known aspect of the lab's history now. This is a field in which the Fitch Lab had a significant contribution since the beginning. During the early years, one can see a constant methodological development with new techniques and equipment, and mainly growing support by computer-based technology that really transformed such applications. In one of the first geophysical surveys undertaken by Richard Jones in 1979 to investigate a 4th century BC pottery workshop in Thassos in collaboration with a French school, the recording of the measurements and the mapping of the results was done by hand. In 1981, the Fitch acquired its first computer, and in the subsequent years, the growing use of computers, even in the field, had an obvious impact on the time required, but also the surface covered by such projects, creating better conditions for the processing and the illustration of the results. The geophysical survey at Stymphalos in 1983 was the first such project to use a computer in the field, an Epson seen here on the right, bottom of the photo, almost a laptop. The survey was undertaken by Richard Jones in collaboration with colleagues from the Canadian Institute and the University of Patras and Bradford. Continuous technological developments in the recording and processing of the data allowed now for larger scale geophysical surveys to be realized covering whole sites. As it's obvious, here in the example of a collaboration between the Fitch Lab, represented by Michael Boyd, and the French School of Athens on the archaeological site of Philippi in Eastern Macedonia. An area of 18 hectares was investigated through hundreds of thousands of measurements that were processed relatively quickly, providing a very detailed picture of the buried structures. That formed the base for a better understanding of the site's plan and for planning subsequent excavations. This is now a standard practice in Greek archaeology by a number of laboratories in Greece and beyond. The Fitch more recently undertook similar projects, just to mention the one at Palekastro in Crete and Platees in Boeotia with Ian Whitbread and Michael Boyd. Beyond geophysical prospection, the Fitch Lab has had a significant contribution in the development of bioarchaeology in Greece, supported by leading experts in the field from British universities such as Paul Halstead, Glynis Jones, and more recently, Amy Bogart. This has been achieved through the establishment of the environmental unit around the 1990s, with dedicated space and mainly research reference collections, essential for the study of human and animal bones, but also plant remains from archaeological sites. The growing number of postgraduate students from Greek and foreign universities, as well as early career scholars using these facilities at the Fitch, is now further supported by annual short-term fellowships, the Fitch bursaries, and we have just advertised the ones for the next academic year. This infrastructure and the collaboration, of course, with local ephorias of antiquities secures the basic conditions for the development and continuous support of bioarchaeological research in Greece as an essential part of archaeological practice. Moreover, it promotes the study of numerous bioarchaeological assemblages, mainly from rescue excavations, from a large number of sites, so far in Macedonia, Central Greece, the islands, and mainly Attica and Boeotia, just to mention some recent examples, such as the study of animal bones from Klitos Kozanis by Vassou Geveleikidi, Proskinas in Theotis by Dimitris Filioglu, and Korobi in Attica by Angelos Hadzikoumis and Valasiais Arkidou. But also the recently completed study of the human bones from one of the largest known Mycenaean cemetery at Kolikrepi, Sparta, by Niki Papakonstantinou. Currently, the Fitch supports through its facilities and expertise in pyrotechnology, TEFRA, one of the first bioarchaeological research projects funded by ELIDEC, the Hellenic Foundation for Research and Innovation. This is a project led by Professor Sevasti Triantafylou of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and the Fitch comprises the base of the project in southern Greece. But since the opening of the Fitch, ceramic analysis has been the major focus of its research. As expected, during these 50 years, significant changes took place in the research focus and questions in the methodology, as well as in the spatial and chronological scale of the research. The number of publications is naturally large, but I would like to focus tonight on 3 of them that I think reflect very clearly how ceramic analysis has developed at the Fitch. In 1986, Richard Jones, as I've already mentioned, published an emblematic volume that comprised a review of scientific studies accomplished till then across the Aegean and East Mediterranean. It remained for many years an essential manual for ceramic analysis applications, but also a valuable reference for provenance studies, mainly through chemical analysis of ceramics. The focus of this early research was mainly on understanding long-distance trade patterns through identifying the provenance of pottery. The fast accumulated analytical data of the first years made clear that differentiation between certain areas and different production centers wouldn't be very straightforward, as for example in the case of pottery coming from Central Crete and Boeotia, just based on their chemical composition, and a new technique was introduced, petrographic analysis with thin sections, that would match the composition of pottery fabrics with certain geologies, but also provide evidence on manufacturing technology and eventually potting traditions. The monograph Greek Transport Amphory, a petrological and archaeological study published in 1995 by Ian Whitbread, the Fitch's second director from 1992 to 2001, marks this important methodological development at the Fitch that has had a major impact on ceramic studies worldwide. Ian Whitbread established a dedicated methodology for the application of petrographic analysis to study ceramics, the so-called ceramic petrology, and his book remains even today the essential ceramic petrologist Bible. Whitbread's work was taken further by others at the Fitch like Peter Day, Sarah Vaughan, Louis Joyner, Marie-Claude Boileau, Jill Hilditch, etc., to reach more recently Georgia Kordadzaki, Edita Marze, Carlotta Gardner, Sergios Menelaou, and now youngest Timoteo Gavin, making the lab a well-known center worldwide for the application of ceramic petrology to the study of archaeological pottery. Gradually, building upon the work of all researchers at the Fitch, a more holistic approach has been developed, the so-called ceramic landscape approach that reflects methodological maturity and accumulated expertise. It was originally developed in the context of 2 projects, firstly on Kythera and subsequently on Aegina, and it is better illustrated in the monograph published by Walter Gauss and myself in 2011, entitled Pottery Production and Supply at Bronze Age, Colonna, Aegina, an integrated archaeological and scientific study of a ceramic landscape. This approach puts more emphasis on the in-depth macroscopic examination of ceramic assemblages from excavations or field surveys in order to define the appropriate strategy for the selection of samples. The subsequent laboratory analysis of the samples, routinely now through both petrographic and chemical analysis, is combined with geological prospection and sampling of raw materials in the study area, followed by experimentation with these materials and comparative laboratory analysis, but also, where possible, ethnoarchaeology of modern potters to help understand better the technological choices of ancient craftspeople. This approach admittedly reflects new research questions, as the emphasis is on understanding all aspects of the pod's biography, not just provenance or just technology, addressing questions linked to the reproduction of traditions, acceptance of innovation, the transfer of technological knowledge, and human mobility eventually. The Fitch's research projects on ceramics have now a different geographical and chronological framework, as the emphasis is on the diachronic investigation of ceramic landscapes through a bottom-up approach, focusing on specific sites such as Palekastro, Eretria, Corinth, Tumba Thessaloniki, Paphos in Cyprus, just to mention a few of the current large-scale projects of the Fitch. This map gives you an idea of the geographical extent of the accomplished or ongoing work. As research progresses across space and in-depth knowledge and data accumulate for a number of sites, the great potential of such a bottom-up approach to understand regional or even global phenomena is gradually becoming more and more evident. Beyond research, training, originally mainly practice-based, has been always an important aspect of the laboratory's work, illustrated in the number of Fitch fellows or trainees that developed into experts and moved in academic jobs all over the world. More recently, practice-based training has been enhanced and systematized through the participation in training programs of undergraduate and postgraduate students, such as the Atlas in Greece, Erasmus, or the Marie Curie training networks by EU, and more recently, the Turing scheme in the UK. A rather recent addition that already mentioned concerns the TOD courses, specialized and intensive training courses for postgraduate students, early career scholars, or even university professors on ceramic analysis and, more recently, on glass analysis. These courses are taught by the Fitch staff, but also by experts from universities in the UK and beyond. Many of the course participants have subsequently returned to the lab as fellows or collaborators through their home institutions, as many of them now have academic positions. These are really the best ambassadors of the Fitch and the BSA, and a huge investment in the future of our institution and the future of the field of archaeology. This map of the world shows the home institutions of the so far participants in the Fitch Ceramic Petrology course, the green dots, while the red shaded areas indicate the research areas. This is indeed one of the most widespread networks that the Fitch and the BSA have been ever involved in. Key elements in the laboratory's work and achievements during the last 50 years, of course, are the people and the collaborations. Hector Catling and Richard Jones were the first of an amazingly dedicated team of BSA and Fitch staff who marked the history of the laboratory. Each of them dedicated part of their life and had an important impact on various aspects of the laboratory's life and history, obviously some more important than others, but overall crucially significant. The time is limited to refer to them now, but a number of blog posts and other activities are planned during the coming months to underline and honor all the Fitch people. And we have already started with the pioneers. So watch for the Fitch blog posts on the BSA's website and social media. This is a work, as Rebecca has already mentioned, that Carlotta Gardner coordinates with the help of our archivist, Amalia Kakissis, and a number of interns. Inevitably, some of the Fitch people are not with us anymore, but have left an important legacy for us to remember, honor, and build upon. The most recent loss, and very premature indeed, has been Mirto Georgakopoulou, our first scientific research officer, and one of the most promising experts in the early Aegean metallurgy. who was instrumental in the establishment of the new analytical chemistry unit in 2010. To honor and document Myrto's legacy, we will organize a conference this year in late September. But we will also very soon advertise the first call of the Myrto Georgakopoulou Research Award for the year 2000, for the academic year 2024 to 25. That has been made possible through numerous donations by friends, relatives, and colleagues. Beyond the Fitch and BSA, there have been endless collaborations with dozens of individuals as well as institutions in Greece, in the UK, in East Mediterranean and the Balkans, across Europe, but also in the Middle East, quite extensively in North America, and even as far as Australia. These have been collaborations in research, but also in sharing facilities and expertise, and more recently in outreach and training events. Beyond the people and the vision, though, the third necessary component for success is, of course, funding. Funding for research has come from a variety of sources beyond the British Academy, including, among others, the European Union, national or private research foundations in Europe and North America, and you can see some of them listed on the slide. Last but not least is funding for infrastructure, and this has been the most difficult to secure since the beginning. And the role of a small number of supporters has been irreplaceable in this respect. And I would like really to dedicate this talk today to these few but precious and long-lasting friends of the Fitch and the BSA, paying special tribute to Marc and Ismene Fitch and Mr. Charles William II. As the Fitch is preparing to celebrate its 50th anniversary, the memory of the opening event at the Western Wall Apotheki of the BSA in the autumn of 1974 is very distant and almost has fainted. The experiment, however, seems to have been successful, and the outcome of all the efforts of Hector Catlin, Richard Jones, and many others who followed is more than evident. The Fitch has set new directions and has contributed to significant developments in the field, and hopefully it will continue doing so. The achievements, but also the mistakes, set the base for the strategic planning of the Fitch Laboratory's future, and of the future of archaeology and archaeological science in Greece and beyond. And this will be the aim of a conference we are planning to very soon advertise that will take place on the 29th of November 2024, exactly a century after the official opening of the Marc and Ismene Fitch Research Laboratory. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Evangelia, for that marvelous and clear account of both the history and the nature of the Fitch Laboratory at the British School at Athens. And I think if any of you were in any doubt before, you can't be now. You must realize just what a vital part of the life and indeed the very existence of the BSA is played by the Fitch Laboratory. We're immensely proud of the fact that our colleagues who work in this area of archaeological science are really pushing the boundaries of archaeology here in Greece, in this particular institution, and again, through all these many collaborations that we've heard about in the two presentations this evening. Just one thing I know our director places particular emphasis on, and I can quite see why here in the account, and you will notice this just looking at the pictures. You know, in Greece, as in also traditionally in the UK, there is a kind of gender imbalance between what we call the hard sciences and in Greece, the philosophiki scholi. My colleagues, many of my former students, the philologists, they tend to be women, and the men go for the so-called hard sciences. And it's wonderful to see that traditional stereotype being just turned on its head just up the road here in the Fitch Laboratory in the British School at Athens. This is a place where it really gives how this has come about. You must know better than I do, but from Evangelia right down through the ranks of the many people who work there, you really see the role of women coming on through the ranks of archaeological science. And I hope, quite apart from the archaeological discoveries that are being made, that's a kind of social change that we would like to feel we're in the vanguard of as well. And again, also, as Evangelia stressed at the very end of that presentation, it's all about education, about mentoring, about the next generation, generations. And I think it was fascinating to hear just how much of the efforts of the Fitch staff go into the training and education formation, if you like, of the of young people coming into these disciplines. And that is going to be the basis of, surely, the next 50 years. Evangelia mentioned funding and the challenges of funding. I think it's wonderful to learn that 50 years ago, £18,000 would buy you even a second-hand mini lab. But in today's world, obviously, we're talking very much larger sums than that. And it will not surprise you to hear that on the occasion of, as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Fitch, we will also be expanding our horizons and looking to find ways of funding many of the exciting plans that our director and indeed our council have for the next few years, indeed the next 50 years of the British School at Athens. But even more important than the funding, it's the people. And I think we've heard a story tonight, two stories tonight, about people working together, passing on their knowledge and their interest, their enthusiasm, their love of this subject from one generation to the next. I think that's what the BSA really is about. And let's, in that spirit, look forward to the next 50 years. Thank you all very much for coming to listen.